Hello, cosmic beings out there. I'm Mannah, a therapeutic astrologer and interviewer. I'm passionate about learning and sharing insights on how to live a better life. I hope you'll stick around as I infiltrate the minds of thought leaders, authors, and healers from around the globe. Wherever you find yourself right now, dear listener, I want you to remember that you have a place to call whole. Now, please enjoy this episode. Welcome, everyone, to Tap In today to the second part with Dr. Michael Smith, where we're going to talk about the 6 ways that we commonly feel overwhelmed. And I'm excited for 2 reasons. First of all, just to have Dr. Michael Smith back, because the first one was brilliant. And secondly, because I feel that we are in a time now where overwhelm is a big thing. There's a lot of Piscean energy as we record this, but of course, whenever you listen to this, probably it's found you because you need it. So I feel it's so important to speak about this. And yeah, no, let me welcome you, Dr. Michael Smith. Otherwise, I'll just start reading aloud from your work. But so welcome, Michael. Thank you for being back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here again.
Good. Okay, so I have some notes because there's a few things on your website. But I like this quote where you say, if life gets too full and challenging, you may experience a lack of sleep, strange dreams, too many thoughts, difficulty making decisions, or compulsive making decisions, times of overwhelming emotion, agitation, fatigue, impatience, anxiety, or depression. And when I read that now, because it's a while ago since we spoke last time, and we planned to do this interview, but when I read it now, I was like, yeah, that I can really relate to that at this point in time. So I feel it's really it's so current. It's exactly what my system and a lot of other people are going through. Again, I relate it to the Piscean archetype. So okay, so explain to us what is this? What is it that happens when we get these symptoms and feel overwhelmed?
Well, I think the best equation I've ever heard for understanding life around health, around longevity, around well-being, excuse me, with respect to being conscious with each other, comes from Chinese medicine. And in Chinese, we say "fu zhong chu xie," which can basically mean the ways we support and add to our capacity to adapt to the world. And the other part, Chuxia, describes in a way our relationship with things that are erosive. And when you go into the old Chinese characters, that even kind of implies chasing a demon out of your house or something. Because, 5,000 years ago, everyone was pretty concerned with the gods and the demons, right? So we hold that context, an easier way to look at it in modern life, that I use these terms a lot in clinic and teaching people, is what if we all woke up every day and had like I say, a 10-minute meditation. We went outside, we looked at the horizon and just sort of scanned, because that's really good for the brain. And on one hand, or one foot, we could say on the left, we could decide, what is my adaptive capacity? And there's a lot in those two words, adaptive and capacity. Like in the sense of capacity, like a bank, or sorry, a battery, or like a bank account in the sense of money, battery, like, the juice to keep going. But there's also an idea of an adaptive capacity in the sense of our skillfulness. And when you think of the words like gong fu or kung fu or qigong, the word gong in Chinese actually implies your capacity. Now, some people might take that as a judgment, in the sense of ableism or something like that. But if you're at the side of the road and there's a car accident, you really want to have someone who knows how to solve those problems in that way. So it's good for us all to be good enough at what we do, but it's also really good to know that we're good enough specifically at putting out the particular fires of our life, or perhaps rebuilding some aspect of our relationship with ourselves or with the world. So that adaptive capacity is something that we always can attend to, we can always appreciate in each other. It really helps us kind of make good friend groups or collaborative groups by bringing different, levels of different capacities together. And when we think of these ancient traditions for healing, it's not really just about one person, it's about a village or a collectivist, shared responsibility to raise kids together and stuff. So again, capacity isn't just this judgmental thing, it's this infinite opportunity to keep finding ways to learn more, to try more things, find out what you really like and what you don't. And then life becomes exciting and childlike again because we're in that space of like, what else can I learn? I want to, try something else. On the other side of it, we have this rather uncomfortable part of life, which is your volume of distress. And that volume can be like the volume of a podcast or a stereo being too loud and or too quiet and like I don't feel connected. Or the volume, again being kind of like the opposite of a bank account in the sense of maybe a volume of debt or a volume of an illness or a volume of family trauma or things. So we're all walking with these 2 feet, in the sense of where's my adaptive capacity this morning? And where's my volume of distress for today or from yesterday? And again, going back to that 10 minutes every day, if you get up, walk outside, me and my partner were just doing that this morning. There's beautiful winds going through this mountain that we're on. The smell of spring is in the air. So it's just, oh, that's such a good feeling. But again, to just take a few breaths and go, where am I at in myself with my capacity to adapt, my mojo, I think we used to say piss and vinegar, if that's still allowed to be said. And then kind of your to-do list on the inside and in the outside. And if you're going to see a doctor, I think that should be the first thing we talk about with our doctors and patients is, how's your battery power and how much do you have to deal with every day?
Mm.
And then there's how much you have to deal with every day that comes from your childhood, and then from the instability in the world right now. And that's always a thing, but right now it's kind of in our face a lot.
Ah, great. Yes. So I'm really glad that I don't just get one answer, that I get to ask you a little bit more about this. Because, yeah, so you're talking about capacity, and what I also hear in there is about regulating yourself, like for example, using those 10 minutes a day. So what I'm curious about is that I recognize these specific symptoms uh, at this moment, for example, with strange dreams and a lack of sleep. And of course, that will then do with the fatigue and the impatience. So that's the effect and the cause there. But I relate it to the Pisces archetype, and you don't have to be an astrologer to do this. What I'm talking about is the collective energy. So I
Okay.
want to ask you about how, because you're also relating it now. You're saying it's not just the individual; it's also like we this. It's a broader thing with this capacity you're talking about. So how do you see it as we're going through what we're going through on a global level, collectively, and for me, Piscean energy is about endings. And
Okay.
and I can't help to think that the reason why I'm also feeling overwhelmed is something to do with it has some spiritual nature to it. So I know I'm just
Yeah.
throwing this at you. I haven't asked you about this beforehand, so I'm curious to see where you will take this.
Can I ask a bit of a leading question? Because I'm terribly uninformed about astrology. Interested, I just haven't really sat down to really study it ever. Other things happening. Does the Piscean energy have anything to do with water?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
100%.
good.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so let's all imagine the ocean.
Yeah.
And then we're going to put a sailboat on the ocean. So I don't know if everyone's been sailing. I had some friends who had a sailboat once, so I got to go out there and play with it. But I think we can all appreciate what it looks like. And it's intuitively obvious that if you look at a sailboat, it's hopefully a very beautiful boat. And as the sails reach up into the sky and they unfurl in the way that they do, that's a really great metaphor for how we can steer through our lives, how we can navigate, how we can, sail with the winds that are moving past us and around us. and that there's sort of a gentle, uh, silent beauty to sailing, if you will. But there's also something really terrifying about sailing, because if you don't have a really good, uh, well-designed sailboat, in the sense of how much sails you have going upwards into the sky and the wind and the chaos and the vicissitudes of fate, or the changes in the lunar cycle, anything like that, that suddenly means that the weather is very dynamic or sudden or difficult. The thing that actually makes a sailboat is that it has a keel reaching down into the ocean. It's like a sail that you don't see. So as long as, we can imagine our lives in a way moving like a sailboat, it's fairly easy to appreciate the silent kind of stunning beauty of the course of our lives. But it's also an opportunity to kind of grip a little bit with white knuckles onto the wheel and be like, oh my God, the weather of my life right now is crazy. Change, the wind is crazy. Uh, Maybe I'm a very sensitive person and my sails are just naturally up into the sky. So it isn't even the wind of my life that I'm feeling. It's the wind of my partner, my neighbors, maybe the 8 billion people on the world scrolling on their phones trying to wonder whether or not they're going to be okay in 25 minutes, or any other thing that might be going on. So when we think of that as our adaptive capacity and our volume of distress, and in this case, the distress is the weather, our weather, the world's weather, our psychic sensitivity as our sails. The only, response in the context of the sailboat is, how do you cultivate that keel, that groundedness, that uh, alliance with the deeper, slower currents in the ocean? And the ocean is kind of the symbol of transformation. It's also the symbol of death and the end of things in a way. So when we can anchor ourselves into change and the imminence of change, but as kind of dropping into the animism of the embodiedness of being, then it isn't just, oh my God, what am I going to do with my mind? And the reason I speak to that imagery is when you go through that list of symptoms like insomnia and strange dreams and like a physical restlessness and a lot of other things, and this is going to get maybe a bit less medical. There's a part of us that is the I, that is not the I. And there's actually a beautiful poem that's, I am not I, that reminds us that there's this living, silent, very, very wise witness. Some people might call it your higher self. I come from a different background, so we don't think about high and low. We think about what you can work with that's here, and then this other part that's just sort of right beside you, that's, kind of the world, but not as the world, in a way. And in that sense, when we're out of alliance or we're in discord with what I guess we call higher self, or kind of the deeper spirit that isn't so egoic, there's a bit of contention there. And we get these messages back and forth in our dreams, in our felt sense, in our day-to-day moments, that we're in a kind of discord. We're in rough weather. The sails are reaching in one direction, and the keel just isn't really going deep enough into the ocean for us to feel like we're on the course that we want to be. Or most of us, or you could say just, again, white knuckles on the wheel, trying to steer away from a rock, or steer away from going bankrupt, or steer away from addiction, or steer towards health and beauty and a sense of residing within our sentience and stillness. And that's every day for everybody. But hopefully the idea of adaptive capacity, a volume of distress, a really good, well tended sailboat with good sails, depending on who you are and how high your sails reach, just tells you how deep of a keel you need to actually feel that you're in the world. Because I've spent a lot of my life feeling all over the place because I end up picking up everybody's stuff. And that's sort of the downside of being autistic is we just feel everything all of the time, and it gets a lot. So that's actually why I tend to live off in the mountains away from everyone. And then I go to the clinic and see people all day, and then I come home back into the mountains where I'm like, ah,
Yeah.
because it's just nice to have a little bit less weather going through your sails sometimes.
Yeah. I can really recognize that. Okay, yeah, so autism or spiritually sensitive, however we can look at it. And yeah, I'm hearing you about the volume and the keel into towards groundedness. But I also really appreciated like that broader picture, that sometimes it's not just that I need regulation. There's something else going on. And yeah, the back and forth you were talking about, I'm having a hard time saying it all back. Michael, I can't do that. But okay, um, so we are in a time of transition, correct? Would you say so? Yeah.
I
And
think we're at a time of renewal, and
renewal, yeah.
yeah, and I think we just really need to decide what we don't want to keep carrying around.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, and so can it be, okay, so I do have notes and we're gonna come back to these.
Okay.
I want to come back to this, but I just feel like a little bit more like, so these strange dreams, for example, that is one of, I don't know if that's what you meant when you wrote this, but for me, there could be some messages in there that I'm not exactly sure what to do about. And eh, and the whole livelihood versus your true calling, making a living versus what you feel maybe you that would be better for you to do if you could. Do you think can it be something like that as well? Is that part of the overwhelm, that this uh, when it's incongruent, the the material side and what you feel you should maybe be doing in life? Okay, I want to put one last word to it. What I've been feeling is that psychologically I've been struggling, but spiritually I've been opening. And it's like there's been coming messages through me, astrologically mostly, but like really opening to that. Nothing that I can then personally go out and live, like something higher, right? Important stuff. But then it's been really difficult for me as the little self, if you will. Okay, what do you want to say about all of that? I'm not sure if it made sense to anyone else.
So one of the best lessons I've ever had came from a First Nations grandmother who had spent a lot of her life taking care of the people on a reservation. And I'm not sure how much people outside of North America or perhaps Australia and other places that still have like living indigenous populations, what the rest of the world actually sees that like, or even has whether or not even people have a sense that that's even in the world. But I guess that's not really the point, though. But if you can imagine someone who is coming from a very long lineage of people who used to live basically like hunter-gatherers up until even 100 years ago, they just have a different understanding of what living in the world, as the world, for the world is really about, if you will. And because that's a part of the work that I do and a part of my background, in the sense of languages and things like that, I've always been very interested in the distinctions and the beautiful parallels between modern kind of culture, if you want to be nice and call it culture, and the earlier ways that people live. And this elder had a lot of really great kind of one-line little bits of wisdom, but one of my favorites is especially when it comes to dreams, which is a very big thing in those cultures because the living day-to-day life is considered kind of an outside dream of the inside dream of a spiritual journey. So we're all living a dream in the sense of not a dream like we're half asleep or we're drunk or something, but a dream in the sense of an unguided but very powerful spiritual journey that's always unfolding. So in one sense, when we talk about that as the dreaming, we have to honor each other's autonomy and sense of unique learning as we unfold and become wiser and things like that. Almost like a different kind of sails. We were talking about unfurling outwards, but not in the danger of a storm, but in the sense of the capacity to understand and learn and grow and be whole. So we have this very different sense of who we are. So in that cultural context, our dreams are very, very powerful because they're the dream that informs the dream, right? They're the thing that comes from the place before the mind that actually informs the mind of its own truth, right? Because otherwise we're all just walking around just like a Pavlovian dog drooling for food and sex or something. So if humans are that, boring, okay, well, some people might see it that way. But ancient cultures have this very different confirmation, this very different affirmation of the beauty and wonder of this unfolding. So, pardon me for being poetic, but I'm trying to bring people into that space of meaning and openness and wonder, because the quote is, when it comes to your dreams, the context is the content. And if you have a very strong dream, do not talk about it with anyone for 4 days and let it reside within you and turn through a cycle of completion. And for us, 4 days or 4 weeks or 4 years, depending on the context, is our completion cycle, because there's like 4 directions to a compass. So if you're going to take a walk around the wheel, it's four of something. Right. So here we are thinking of our dreams, and then there's the story of the dream. I was in an alien invasion, and the aliens looked like Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and I'm just making this up in this moment for the conversation. And everyone was hitting each other over the head with pillows, and for some reason, this alien dinosaur attacked with pillows. I could take that literally. I have no idea how, but I could try. Or I could say, what is this thing about something raw, ancestral, visceral, reptilian, lizard-like, the lizard brain, maybe some raw, ancient ancestral grudge within me, and there's this conflict, and it has to do with, alienation or marginalization, or maybe it has to do with why are we fighting with pillows, and maybe the pillows are a special color. I don't know. But when we start to take the literal components of a dream away and say it doesn't matter if it was dinosaurs or bunny rabbits, it's about contention and the fact that we're not really trying to hurt each other, but we're stuck with something between the humanness and some other capacity within ourselves. So in that culture, dream interpretation is something that really has to do with the meaning below the symbols. Whereas in a lot of modern contexts, the symbols are the thing that we attach extra meaning to, and then the symbolism of the symbols plus the other symbolism of the relationships, and then we just keep pulling at all kinds of stuff until, in one sense, it's just a giant, that drawer in people's kitchens that has everything in it. It's like, where's the batteries and the tape and the fork and the thing and grandma's old watch and blah. At a certain point, symbolism just becomes a drawer, like we call it the junk drawer. It's just anything could be thrown in there and, have fun with it. Whereas in earlier cultures, it's more of like there's a tone, there's a background noise, there's some just whisper of meaning within the whole play or escapade that's happening within the dream. So it's less is more in that context, I guess.
I definitely know that drawer, first of all, where everything is in. And yeah, I relate to that a lot with symbols, that it's not the symbol itself, it is symbolizing something. It's a witness, it's a testament of something else, of another reality even. And that's what actually I just want to ask you before I go to my notes. I just want to ask you, is that intentional? Would those cultures that you mentioned, would they see it as intentional, the dream world, the messages, would it come from somewhere? I'm wondering about this because maybe I'm just influenced by a very a Protestant, like Christian way of seeing it, that there is one God and he's showing you these signs. Maybe that is what is in my mind. But also I feel it's, and maybe because of that, I feel it's a little bit scary if there's no organization. It just comes and no one knows why, these images in dreams. So I feel like I want there to be some kind of mastery behind it, but I don't know, what would you think, and what would you think about these cultures? What is the idea there?
Well, I think there's I one thing I would first encourage all of us to stop doing is saying or.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that in a commanding, like everyone stop doing that. I'm saying
Right.
as an invitation. What if we were to decide to take, that 10 minutes every morning and say and?
Mm.
Because on one side of the way modern life is going is, like you said, it's very hierarchical. There's a deep causal force and perhaps perceived outcome and perhaps, perceived boundaries of good and bad, hell and heaven and this
Yeah.
and that. And even if that's true, there's another way that we experience it anyway. So down here on the ground, when we could say that we're all walking around, and I hope this is going to be okay. This is not literal. I'm just asking people to see something like the sailboat. So imagine, if you will, that we're all puppets in the sense that, I don't have a puppet near me, but if I was to put my hand inside of a sock, don't have a sock near me either, I could make little face movements with my hand, and because there's a sock or a puppet on there, we all identify with the costume of the puppet. So I can think of my body, my incarnation, my physical appearance, my family experience, my education, my tattoos if I have them, or what fancy hairdo or whatever it might be. They just adorn the surface of my puppet. And what a beautiful thing to have. If you're going to have a puppet, why not put beads and, beautiful things and, the best possible things to make it as beautiful and unique as possible, because that's a beautiful part of being here. Like, have a great time with your ego, your appearance, your humor, your playfulness, your audacity, your shyness, because that's what we all get as kind of something that emanates from each of us. And in Chinese, we call that your shenming, your spiritual luminosity, what you radiate into the world, the light that comes through you. But that's not the universe. That's just what you're doing with it. So again, if we think of those puppets, in the sense of how you look, and as I can see you on the screen, and how I look for, you and anyone else seeing this on the screen, what if we were to just take a moment and recognize that the one actually observing what I see is the hand within the puppet,
Yeah.
right? And then when I look at you and I can see the beautiful puppet that you are, and I don't mean that in any other way than the way that this metaphor plays out. But I can also look at you and see the hand coming through your eyes. And then I can be the hand seeing the hand, right? And for some people, that could say God looking at God, but that could get somebody into trouble depending on how literally you take things. But if we drop back into that indigenous, more animistic way of seeing the world, we're all at play in the imminent collaborative now. In this frame of reference, we are not in charge of the big steering wheel of a big sailboat in the sky. And that's an interesting phenomenon from an indigenous cultural point of view, that, say, European religions seem to be set up that we're trying to understand how God thinks, works, and knows, just in case he or she falls asleep, because we have this compulsion to try and steer the world around to get it right, or to get it not wrong, or to get maybe more money, or to get less sins, or something like that. So it's a kind of anxiety control power dynamic, instead of waking up going like, I wonder how beautifully playful I can be with all of the co-creative dreaming puppetry around me. And that's not an insult, and that's not a comparison. It's an invitation to actually be with a little smile inside your face, going like, well, we're going to play out the mundane world, because we have to eat, we have to find partners, we want to raise our kids well, we want to find the things we like, avoid the things we don't. But we're also secretly on the inside, the one that's kind of invisible to it all, the some people might say higher self, or the self behind the self, kind of smiling with a deep ancestral patience and wisdom and kindness and willingness to just keep bunking into each other to see what happens. And that's a very humble, very, again, playful, very, very gentle, very humorous way of being in the world. And I think of all the different ceremonies that I've sat in with different indigenous nations and cultures as I've been learning about those things in my life. And there's always this underlying basic sense of humor that, yep, we're all just here doing this kind of at play with our relative childlike or elder-like place in the world, but no one's taking it as actually what's going on. We're all just doing our best, but with what little tiny wisps of influence we can have to nudge the sailboat of our communities and our livelihoods around moment by moment. But no one has the perception that anyone knows what's going on, or anyone's in control of anything. And I think that's what people kind of imply when they say the 5D world, which is tap into what the breadth of the energy of the universe is doing, instead of, be afraid of whether or not your neighbor is going to steal your chainsaw.
Your chainsaw.
Oh, sorry, where I live, you have to cut trees up to keep your house warm, or else you die.
Okay, I thought that went dark.
Sorry, yeah, it's for us. It's yeah. I guess most of the tools I have in my shed would be used for other things and other dreaming, terrifying movies that someone might want to make.
Oh, but wonderful. I really appreciate what you shared. Absolutely appreciate it. And yeah, it's a constant wonder with that dream world, to
Yeah.
call it that. It's like, what is it? What a
But we have to like take a moment and go, okay, if I'm getting really serious, or I'm really about control, or if I'm really focusing on this or that, black and white, that's actually coming from a place of pain. And we're
yeah,
just in a hurry to make sure we're not going to be in more pain.
yeah, yeah. That is so recognizable with the clients who come for astrology if they're really in a stressful place. Like, just want to know, is my friend gonna live or die? Am I
Mhm.
gonna get more money? Like, just answer me. When is this gonna end? And I mean, I think it's a good thing to come to an astrologer, but that's just not. It's hard to satisfy that, because I think from what you just said, because you come from that place, and then it's hard for what we need with something like astrology, the active imagination. That open space where things become more flexible. And yeah, but it's understandable. It's a survival state, right? I guess
Mhm.
it's a part of the survival state in us that is also feeling the overwhelm. Um,
Mhm. Can I share something quickly?
yeah, yeah.
So I'm not in any way an astrologer. So when I say this, I'm not speaking as if I have a clue about what it is to be an astrologer. But many years ago, one of my teachers taught me how to use something called the Ling, which is one of the oldest kind of oracles from ancient China. And I actually had to go through this process of finding a specific kind of tree that was struck by lightning. And then I had to take the branch that was struck by lightning and cut it up into little pieces and then carve all these little things and then spend a year, or no, it was 60 days going through this sort of ceremonial thing to activate these pieces as I carved in these little symbols. And what you do is you shake them up, and while you're shaking them up, there's 12 of them. You imagine the conundrum or the context or the struggle or the relationship or the decision. You don't think about the consequences. You don't think about what the best and worst could be. You just hold your attention on, maybe, marriage or career or whatever, and what it's like for you right now. And this will actually help us go into the next thing that you wanted to talk about, because it's about what it's like to be in that adaptive capacity and that volume of distress, not the story, the state. Because this is it's early animistic, shamanistic oracle work. So you shake it up, and then you throw them on the ground, and then depending on or the table you're working on, it doesn't have to be the ground. And then you look at how the pieces and the symbols are organized, and then you have this sort of reference of what they might tell you. And they don't tell you what's going to happen. They tell you what it is you need to find within yourself and how to relate to the challenge and the dream and the self within, so that you can navigate like the keel of your sailboat that specific situation in the most efficacious or beneficial way for everyone involved, not just for you to get what you want or avoid what you don't. So when I think of the earliest form of what maybe a modern astrology is used for, which is to predict outcomes and to make good decisions, the earliest way that that's ever been done that I'm aware of has to do with animistic state, not outcome or control.
It's exactly what you were just saying there. It's exactly what astrology can better answer, at least the modern astrology that I work with. It is the capacity, the resources, the steps that you would need to now, take from this place. So, and I think, and astrology is that's just one field. So every time you say you don't know astrology, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just one way of saying this, because I think it's a image of, well, what I consider to be reality, because we can't just know, we can't just get the date. This is when it's gonna be over, but we can get help to find the resources to overcome. You know,
Mhm.
maybe we can agree on that from
Mhm.
different fields. I wanted to go into some of these notes, Michael. You you talk about 6 common ways to become overwhelmed. Is that going to take us anywhere to go through those, or do you
Mhm.
want what do you think? Is that a good place?
Well, I'd like to do that in a way that's maybe a bit more experiential, because if we just talk about that list as a list and uh, in a way that's just about how hard things can be, or where we're the most wounded, then we're not really uh, it's more like adding problems
Yeah,
instead of giving us a better map.
it's going to be a bit
So
depressing.
so and I don't want to take way too much time, so I want to set this up very efficiently, but I also want to help people. So this is something I do with my patients a lot. And if anyone ever looks at my medical files, and I've been doing this for 30 years, so that's thousands and thousands of medical files, off in the corner, quite often I'll have the name of an animal and then some kind of being on the animal, and then some kind of way that that being is looking into the world for a higher understanding or kind of meaning. So the easiest way that we have this conversation, when I don't really have a lot of time to get into it, is to think of Western cowboy movies. Or because I grew up in a hunting lodge where horses and riding horses and hunting and running around in the forest and stuff like that was just every day. So maybe my memories have brought up a different sense of how often people think about people riding horses, comes into your life. But when I ask my patients to do this, I ask them to think of an animal that you would ride. And it could be a mythical thing like a dragon, or it could just be a horse. And then I want people to tell me what kind of being is riding that animal. So you could be an elf on a dragon, or you could just be a guy or a girl on a horse, or you could be, I don't know, a chicken on a goat. I mean, you could be anything riding anything. It doesn't matter. It's meant to be kind of a free association symbolism. I'm going to stay with horse and a rider, depending on, who you want to be on the horse. But it could also be anything you want. So we can play this out. Now, who's ever on that, I'm going to say horse, is trying to get somewhere. So they're using either binoculars or a telescope, or maybe there's a dragon with an elf on it looking through a crystal ball. It could be anything. But the thing we're looking at the world through is our existential lens, because we're trying to get over the horizon, and we're riding our horse around to get where we're going because we want to get somewhere, but we don't always know where we're going, but we start to build a sense of why we're going that way. So that's what I mean by our ex.
Can I ask a question just for how to do this association? Would you use a little time and effort to figure out which animal or whatever it is that you're riding, or would it be the first thing that pops into your mind?
Well, usually when I'm in the clinic, I just ask people, would you like to go with cowboys and horses, or something more like connected to the way you think about the world? And about 80% of the people that I have done this with for decades just say, yeah, whatever. I just want to understand what you mean. Other people will say, no, I really want to feel into the kind of animistic way that I relate to this. So
Okay.
that's why I bring it up, so that anyone who hears this podcast can either just be like, yeah, horse is fine, cow person is fine, binoculars are fine, or they're like, no, I really want to see myself in I'm trying to, there's a movie of a kid riding this giant white, flying snake dog or something.
All right.
So it could be anything, right?
Okay. Good.
So I'm going to just break this down quickly for people. So I'm going to go again with a horse and a person who looks like somebody out of a, rodeo or a cowboy movie or something like that. And then they're going to have binoculars. So let's say this has been going on for a few months and everyone's a little bit tired. So how you treat your body, how you treat your health, how you attend to things like food and sleep and water and rest and play and sex and exercise and all of that. That's the energy and the experience of your horse. So if you don't take care of your horse, how do you think your journey is going to go as a rider? The horse is going to try and buck you off. which is well, that's the expression we use here, in the sense of like throw you on the ground, or it's going to be weak, it's going to be staggering, it's going to maybe jump off of a cliff because it doesn't want to play anymore, because the body just shuts down after a while if we just misuse our horse or our more instinctual self.
Sure.
And, that's common sense, right?
Mm.
Now, imagine that you're the horse, you're the visceral embodied self. You just want to walk around feeling the grr and the purr of a healthy, happy physical life. And perhaps when we're younger, we definitely attend to those kind of compulsions and needs and curiosity because it's very much moving through us in that way. So let's all just take a moment and tap into that visceral 24-year-old grr and purr, let's find out who I am in the world as a physical being, because I'm still kind of invincible in some way. But then imagine that you're also being ridden around by this person who plays very sad, sentimental music that has lyrics like, "My dog just died, my truck ran over my cat, I'm so sad because everything hurts all the time." So imagine that you're a horse and you have this person singing into your ears 24 hours a day about sentimental, sad, cloying, thick, kind of made up, sentimental, meaningful, angst in the chest kind of stuff. And, eventually the horse is just going to want to start banging its face into a tree just to get a break from the nonstop, kind of whining about whatever's going on. And, that could go badly. I'm just sort of making an example of that. It could also be a very happy bard singing on the horse, celebrating the universe, or reading Rumi poems. I mean, it could be anything. I'm just helping us kind of notice that as the physical embodied instinctual, visceral, kind of adaptive, being that we all are, in that place, we don't really care about the story. We just want a good sleep, a good romp with our partner once in a while, good food, good sunrises and sunsets, good chances to play as dance, do the good things, and just be in the aliveness. But as the one riding, we want that horse to take care of us, to get us from morning to evening, from maybe 24 to 88, without getting too sick or anything. But we forget that we're both. And to bring both of those back into our sort of sphere of awareness. And then remember, oh wait, there's a third thing. I have to be able to see the journey of my life across the path from where I came from to where I'm going with a sense of yes and a sense of why. Otherwise, we have existential angst, or we just keep looking behind us with existential pain. And we all have a bit of, both. It's just choosing to orient ourselves to, am I taking care of my horse? Am I taking care of my rider? Am I actually enjoying as much as I can the chance every day to be at least aware of my choices and the dreaming that I'm creating, co-creating my life, and that I have a sense of why and beauty and meaning that may or may not, turn out the way I want, but at least I'm not sitting here just, scrolling my phone or clicking through channels on a television to see what kind of, rinse and repeat conditioned sort of annoyingly repetitive music, if you will, that we consume as the rider. Because we're sitting there most of the time in a chair watching a screen on a phone, on a tablet, on a computer, on a television, in a bar. People go to concerts and then they watch the screen. They go to a football game and watch a screen. So a lot of us were just sitting and watching and sitting and watching, which isn't great for our horse because that's not its job. The rider is like, well, I don't really have to go anywhere. So now I'm in existential angst because I guess sitting and watching is the outcome. Be in the audience. Why create anything when you can just sit here and complain or have judgments? And who cares about why? There is no why. It's just sit there scrolling, having opinions. And that's what's happened in the last 25 years. I'm saying that maybe as an old, crusty, judgy, person who's 57, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, the quality of our rider and our horse and our binoculars has just turned into a very myopic, very anxious, very comparative paradigm. And what a wound, what a loss.
Mm. No, I don't even think what you just had that bracketed sentence of, oh, maybe it's because I'm old or something, but maybe it's just because you're wise, Michael. Maybe that's what it is, right? Maybe it's the wisdom actually. And to have seen the difference, I mean, the technology and everything is definitely not there when I was a child or young either. So that's grown exponentially, but maybe even more so because you grew up the way that you did, like you were saying, in nature.
Yep.
Maybe that's why it's even more evident to you. I really like that image. I like that image. I feel like I could do a lot with that. Like
Yeah,
who's
that's the idea.
who's the animal,
So,
the rider,
yeah.
and where's the perspective? Where are you going? Yeah.
So that gives us three ways to be a self, because in Taoist practice, in the TCM's Chinese medicine psychotherapy that I teach and practice called Qing, which there's actually a course I'm teaching right now that if people want to come and learn that stuff, they'd be welcome to. We start with the three, and that three turns into six. So I'm just going to use that kind of a lead in to bring this to the next thing because of what you wanted to talk about today. And I know I only have like 15 minutes left, so we'll do our best. And I have to say trigger warning because the only way we can go into this next part is in the context of something very, very hard to be with. So we could make this specific to your experience or my experience, or we could kind of make an avatar of someone going through a difficult experience. But you know your audience, you know what what you want to have brought up on your podcast. So let me know if you can of a very difficult, perhaps traumatic, perhaps very difficult situation for someone to be in, and then I'll kind of play that out if that's okay.
How traumatic do you want it?
That's why I'm leaving it up to you because I don't want to scare people because this is my job, and believe me, I could probably scare people with things I've had to talk to people about. So,
Right, okay, well, I'll be inspired by the world situation. What about if someone is finding themselves in one of those minority groups that are now being neglected? Um, yeah, I think neglected is the word, or but which is because of what is happening in the States, where okay, these
oh
groups
yeah.
of people cannot have, the money for this and that. If you find yourself in one of those minorities that are not being recognized and helped any longer, but
Mhm.
that's kind of scary. Would that work as an example?
Well, I mean, considering I've lived most of my life as one of those people, I'm feeling a certain amount of chills actually just even thinking about it.
Yeah,
Um, I mean that's less immediate than say something that's very physically
yeah, like a shock
urgent.
trauma.
But we could go with that because I think most people who've been marginalized, myself included, have had a lot of direct and immediate assaults or insults. Um, so we'll play with that and see how it goes.
Okay.
So here's a person, um, and they're living in that environment where uh, everything that's happening around them in the sense of volume of distress isn't just the usual day-to-day get up, go to work, pay your bills, keep your family happy, try and not get burned out, and the usual things. Because that's what most people are hoping for, and this is so sad and almost embarrassing that we're just looking for a level playing field to just run at all of this problem solving to just make our lives work. Pay your bills, pay for your phone, pay for your taxes, get an extra job, grind away, grind away, grind away. So that in itself is horrible. And I don't know if people can see me or hear me, but I'm holding my hands kind of level with my eyes. And that's what we think is fair. So we'll all just swallow the disgust that comes up in that moment. That this is what we can do as human beings. So far, that's the best we can do is grind away at something that seems fair. So now I'm going to take this and drop one hand downwards and lift the other hand up like it's a hill. And that's what it's like to be a marginalized person, is now you have to go up this hill because everything is not just a challenge, it's actually designed to be against you. It's designed to put you at a disadvantage, and maybe not specifically to put you at a disadvantage. It's just designed to keep other people at a reasonable sense of fairness to advantage. So if you're not one of those, whatever group it might be, you're now marginalized or below the probability of that group to succeed. So you have to go up this extra hill. So if we think of our adaptive capacity, our volume of distress, we've just, tripled or quadrupled how every day is now, it's not just wake up and stretch and go, oh, I'm going to take a swing at the day. It's more like I can barely remember whether or not I slept enough to get up and figure out with what, a little bit of food that I might have in my house to even feed my kids. And then go and, do your very best to see if you can, move up one or two steps up this hill, knowing that someone else keeps making up the rules as to how much is coming down that hill against you. Almost like water pouring down a hill, washing away the people who live on that hill, because nobody wants these people around, because that's why they're marginalized. Well, unless you want cheap labor, then it's nice to have them around, and
Yeah.
you can use their bodies like slaves, right? So that's been going on since the pyramids. So it's not like anyone's just invented that, but it's just for us to be able to recognize humans are capable of this. So I don't want to go too much deeper into that because I don't want to horrify people. But if we were in that situation, and I hope the imagery has helped us collaboratively sit for empathy and compassion for anyone in that situation, and which I think we're all in a little bit, some way. We can start with the horse and the rider and the binoculars just for a moment and go, what's that like to be in your body? Exhausting. What's it like to be in yourself? There's a complete lack of real passion because I'm just exhausted to just even breathe in, never mind breathe out. And then the existential why, it's never been up to me anyways. All I can do is run and duck and try and find a way around corners that arbitrarily are thrown up around me as maybe some invisible person takes a swing at my knee with a baseball bat just to make it one step harder. Right. So I guess I'm just viscerally expressing my memories of getting through school and stuff. So, it's a different thing. So if we go from the 3 to the 6, now, if I drop into my lower self, my horse, my body, my guts, my groin, my, animistic self that's really just in the embodied isness of life. Okay. Instinctually, am I mostly in a fight, flight, or freeze place? Right? So fight, keep going, keep working, get 6 jobs, try and, not, burn out too fast, but you're probably already there. If it's flight, then maybe I'll just pick up an addiction because then I don't really need to be, engaged at all because, I'm just kind of running away. And we've all spent time there. I mean, this isn't about judgment, it's about empathy, right? So I can, fight the good fight. I can, run away and hide in addiction. And I've been there. So we can all try that. Or we can go to a freeze state, which is dissociate, scroll your phone, forget about whether or not you even ever had some sense of meaning for who you are.
Yeah, like,
And,
give up,
just,
right?
pardon me?
It's the giving up as well, and what you're talking about is it's survival state, it's nervous system states, but it's also what we talk about, just like feeling the grind and
Mhm.
I just have to survive really to get through this rather than actually
So,
living,
yeah. So
right?
there's these six ways that we can be experiencing overwhelm, and it isn't one or the other. It's more of a chance for us to sit with all of them. So one is that instinctual place, like instinctually, is it fight, flight, or freeze? And viscerally, it's kind of the same question, but it's more about what it's like in your adaptive capacity, your sense of deep, raw, I have to keep going as myself, right? So what's my visceral adaptive, sense? And that gets a little bit more personal, and it often helps us understand our family upbringing because we're either going to do what our parents did or do the opposite of what our parents did. So when we get in that visceral place, it's a bit story, a bit state. So that helps us understand what you might say is a more applied compassion or a bit of psychotherapeutic self-awareness of like instinctually there's no words. We're just like, viscerally and adaptively, we're like, okay, I've got to figure out this and this makes some sense. So we're just coming up to our language might help us, but it's still pretty raw.
Mm.
So this is all happening kind of below the diaphragm. So we come up into the diaphragm, up into the chest a little bit. Then we have this more kind of social bonded intuition in the sense of who's on my side, where am I connected, what's happening with intuition, and you know, why is the world like this in a social dynamic, and you know, there's some cruelty going on and there's this other stuff, but we also want to just also, besides intuitively sort of checking in with what you might call the felt sense astrology of kind of cause and effect in the world around us in the short term, there's also the immediate sense of how we feel, right? So, and this gets a bit, you know, open-ended, but when we come up into the chest and the upper part of the diaphragm and how our heart feels and how our breathing feels, there's these other things that we ask in the sense of how we relate. Are you going um, to feign or fawn or frustrate? Because there's always the three F's to everything. So when we kind of come up into the central part of ourselves and you think of your childhood, when you think of your most powerful or disempowering parent, did you feign or fake that you respected them? Or did you fawn and completely give up on your own authenticity to just survive within the shadow of their own, you know, unmet needs? Or did you just frustrate them to give yourself enough space to control your autonomy a little bit while you know, stayed outside of the shadow and kind of set up this stalemate of conflict with your parents or with other people to just keep yourself at a distance from stuff you figured out as a child was never going to work for you anyway. So that's how we relate to our parents, which is also how we relate to the organizing influences in the world, because that's kind of like a parent. You know, the government decides what your, you know, choices are. So when we come into the more intuitive and emotional places, that's the question. You know, have you come into the world as someone who, under profound distress, will feign or fawn or frustrate?
It's really what learned coping strategy you have with you from
Hmm.
past, and then now that's being expanded up, yeah, into what's going on in the world
Hmm.
today. Even though you are an adult, this is some of the same dynamics is going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very, very quickly, there's two left, which is, you know, above the part of us that can speak, is the egoic self, the one who can communicate with our facial expressions and our words and the way we, you know, maybe use eye contact and other things, and we know what we're doing as an egoic person. And it's not that we're always being manipulative, it's just that we're always negotiating for self and other, for, you know, alliance and trust or manipulation and distrust. So that egoic self is always kind of playing slight con artist, slight, can I find my actual tribe and my actual real family in a way. And then there's this other part of us that's sort of the existential, spiritual, the self behind the self, which is watching all of this happen in a way as sentience itself, just being kind of like, well, this is kind of um, uh, full of love and beauty and wisdom and something that we all remember as deeply humane and human, or I think I'm stuck in a bit of a nightmare. And I'm going to kind of maybe retreat existentially or really isolate existentially, or maybe flip out existentially and decide that I have to build a special hat that connects me to the aliens who live in the hollow moon, or some other story that allows me to kind of just align myself with some sense of higher purpose because I don't really feel any connection to my adaptive capacity down here in the world. So again, horse, rider, binoculars, instinctual, visceral, adaptive experience. Up here on the rider, the self, we have this more intuitive, social, visceral quality of being that's more about our sense of life. And up here in the mind, you know, we have this egoic uh, puppet story that we use to kind of protect ourselves and become a self until we're maybe in midlife when we start realizing, well, that wasn't really what I wanted to do, and we can start diminishing that endeavor. But you kind of have to build a self to let go of a self, and then we become maybe more the existential, wise, spiritual person someday. But anytime we look at overwhelm, and we could go back to that marginalized person who's, you know, basically just grinding to get up that hill, What's it like instinctually? What's it like viscerally as you adapt to the world? What's it like intuitively as a social being around you? What's it like emotionally day to day? What's it like for you to keep performatively manufacturing the ego self that kind of tries to make it cool or, at least somehow positive, or it's just all about the negative. And then there's this part of us that's the higher self, you could say, that's just experiencing all of this with more fatigue and more disappointment and more depression or more anxiety or more terror, because we all have a memory of what a human, collaborative, peaceful, compassionate, healthy society might be like.
Mm. Okay,
And
so
each of us has, just one
yes.
last thing.
Yeah.
Each of us has those six parts to us, but each of us feels our way in the world uniquely in the sense of how much of one, two, three, four, or five, or six is actually the core wound we carry the most.
Mm. Oh, can you repeat that? I'm not sure I got that. So the core
Okay.
root is related to
So,
one of these.
so can we give a nickname to our person?
Yes, Sophie.
Sophie. So Sophie is a marginalized person. She's been going through all of the things she's been going through. And maybe I shouldn't even say she. That one Sophie that we all can, hold our attention on right now has been up, grinding her way. That one's way up that hill for so long. That hill has defined that one's way of being in the world. And Sophie, that one who we all care about, might be wounded the most in their existential why or
Mm.
their egoic need to be tricky to just keep going, or completely, manipulative to just keep going, or completely selling out themselves on any sense of self-respect to just keep going. And then lower below that, which you could pick any of those things, is the emotional way that's like. Then there's that intuitive sense of who can you trust, and maybe that's completely lost, or maybe that's still an open thing. And then below that is the visceral, adaptive, truth force to keep going, to fight the good fight, or completely con artist, uh, sell your soul to the highest bidder kind of sense. And then on the instinctual animistic sense, it's just like, how close to complete cyclic, visceral, adaptive, instinctual burnout are we? Or have we completely broken that horse to such a degree that there is no spontaneous aliveness, animistic energy left, because we've just been completely domesticated into a kind of slave-like relationship with using our will and our body to just keep going. So
Oh,
there's always, it's always a unique thing for each individual. But in the work that I do and other people do, is to begin with an awareness that we're all hurt in some way in those six parts of ourselves. But we have to attend to the deepest wound first, because that's the only way to relieve ourselves of enough pain and symptoms to begin to feel like there might be a chance to return to some quality of aliveness and beingness, to actually build confidence, to stay with whatever protocols or practices or therapies are helping us. But we always have to start with the biggest screaming wound, or else what are we doing?
really, really good. Thank you for that. Wow. Um, oh man, yeah. And I only interrupted you a few times to just get clarification, but this is good stuff, and this can be listened to several rounds, because I know, like you said, this is a course you're doing, so of course it's gonna be compromised a little bit here. Um, and yeah, that's similar to the trauma therapy that I do, where we go to the earliest and the worst, because, well, the worst of the earliest, because then um um that's the place in the nervous system. If that's healed, then the rest is gonna it's gonna be better as well. So that's also what I enjoy when I hear you talk, is like finding things. Oh, okay, I can recognize that from trauma therapy, but I know that your background is in therapy, but it's also different, right? You have all of this ancient knowledge in there. So is it like a system that you've made? Is these categories? Is it something that that you've planned out, or do you have it from one tradition? And how is it?
So when I studied traditional Chinese medicine, I actually got to study in a Taoist oral tradition with a family who had specialized in what's called Qing Shi Bing, which is, the simplest way to say that would be just trauma therapy. There's a lot more to how we translate things than that. But they were also a family who taught Shu Dao, which is Taoist cultivation. And their background in the Taoist cultivation since went back to a text called the Yi Dao Kuan Yuan, which is a way of approaching Taoist practice or inner cultivation or spiritual life as a practitioner of some kind of medicine or healing. And again, in this family, the Qing Shi Bing, or the kind of psychotherapeutic approach, was the way that they actually cultivated not only their own spiritual practice, but the way they helped other people. And that's all based on this very earlier practice called Shanming Dao, which is the way of cultivating spiritual luminosity, which is originally from one of the earliest Taoist texts about 2,000 years ago, just under 2,000 years ago, that was one of the first texts written by a woman. The text is called the Huang Tingjing, or a Yellow Court Classic, which Taoism is always hidden in symbolism, so I'm not going to get into that too much. But anyway, in Taoist cultivation, which is a kind of apophatic or beyond the self meditation, in order to get beyond the self, you have to recognize that you have many selves. So we can give up on the idea that there's just like an operating actual egoic self that is actually real or actually in charge or actually important. So we first, look at these three selves: the horse, the rider, the binoculars. And maybe that's a modern frame of reference I use for modern people, but it's the lower Dantian, or energy center, the middle, and the upper. And we have lots of different ways to cultivate awareness and connection and cultivation with the lower, middle, and upper Dantians, which is, it takes 3 years to go through that whole initiation. And I actually teach people now. It was called Neikong, which is a 3-year lineage apprenticeship for people who actually want to study formally in a Taoist lineage in that way. So when we have those three selves, those three dantians, we have inner cultivation, meditation, energy work, cultivation that's perhaps similar to chakras. I can't be certain of that. I'm not formally trained in anything, high level yoga, so I don't want to pretend that I am. Excuse me. So when we drop into any component of Tao, of Shu Dao, of Taoist cultivation, we begin with kind of the idea that there's something of an echo of reality moving through that we can interact with. But we're also aware that that's not actually reality. It's just what's moving through us that's tangible. So anything we can connect to something that's moving through us that's tangible, lower, middle, upper, horse, rider, existential binoculars. Now we can attend to that relationship. Anytime we can connect to what's coming into the universe that's tangible, kind of like, there's nothing and then there's wind. You can see the wind in the grass. You can't see the wind, but it's there. You can feel it. But it's tangible, but it's invisible. So anytime we can touch into these energy centers, feeling into just the echo of what's tangible, the first thing we do is say, well, let's look at this in the context of yin yang, masculine and feminine, not in the sense of modern gender politics, but in the sense of the polarity of nature. And the one way we see that in this context is one thing is vertical, one thing is horizontal. One thing is about the axis, the profound, the numinous, the way the universe seems to turn around herself. And then one thing is horizontal, which is how does this relate to being a being in an ocean of beings? So if I think of the lower self, there's the north-south, the axis of just the fact that we're all instinctual animals in a way. That's the horse. But also in the lower, I have to connect to the world around me in the horizontal sense of, survival that I can think through or feel into a bit. That's the visceral adaptive self. So I have sort of survival instinct and then actual planned learning adaptive capacity. And that becomes our lower sense of self. There's the horse, but then there's two parts to that horse. And then we come up into the middle self, and we're like, okay, here I am as this sort of sentient being. But at the same time, there's a part of me that feels what's going on socially in the horizontal sense. And as a child, we learn a lot from that. So we feel our feelings, sad, happy, angry, but we also reach out in our feeling to other people's, sad, happy, angry feelings, and that's our intuition. So when we drop into our middle self, we have what it is that's arising from within our own heart, and then there's what's entering into our heart from everyone that we touch and feel and smell and hear and know around us, which becomes a part of our state of being as a self. Because we're not separate, we're all sharing this dream, but we're also in our autonomy with our own dream. But we're also touched by the relative autonomy or perhaps psychosis of the people around us, right? So lower, middle, upper, or our vertical, a kind of polar truth about the world, and then the messy things that happen amongst beings, middle parts, we're going to feel everything. But a lot of the stuff we feel is true to self, and a lot of what we feel is just the chaos of being in a family, a community, a school of 30 kids your own age that are all screaming because there's only one person who's barely trained to deal with two kids, never mind 30 or something fun like that, because it's fun to play it out, right? And then up here in the upper energy centers, which is something we don't really get into a lot of details with because that's where the danger happens. Because people can try and, fix themselves from the top down instead of the bottom up, which usually doesn't go very well. But up here on the top, we have the forward-facing horizontal egoic self that might be feigning, fawning, or frustrating, or authentic, or capricious, or manipulative, or 1,000 other things we might do with our face. But then there's this existential true person, and this is a bit of a trippy meditation. Can I ask you to just try something quickly?
Sure. Sure.
Can you bring your awareness to the tip of your nose?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, bringing that we can all bring our awareness to something, and the tip of our nose often makes us think of sort of the playful thing your grandparents would do, touching your nose, or the clown nose, or something that's kind of funny. Because our noses, for some people, tip of our nose is always kind of something that we can think of as kind of a coyote humor place. So we don't want to stay there because we don't want to go off into making up funny stories. But given that we can locate our awareness somewhere funny, I'm going to invite us all to locate our awareness somewhere terrifyingly true to life. And this is a martial arts thing, like a life or death thing.
Mm.
Bring your awareness to the surface of the pupils of your eyes. Just try that. Take a deep breath and just inhale. Feel your eyeballs, close your eyes. When you open your eyes and exhale, just stay at the surface of your pupils. And notice that all of a sudden there's no words, and you're about the most viscerally, instinctually, emotionally, intuitively, egoically present you've probably ever been. Because that's where we have to be when the world gets real.
Mm.
And there is no story. We call that the howling silence of Tao. That's the entry into a kind of connection with your ancestral spiritual connection, because that's what your ancestors lived through, was the surface of their eyes. They didn't have a lot to say or think because there wasn't a lot of comparison. There was the 20 people you got to meet your entire life and the ever arising challenge of living in the world right now.
Mm. Michael, that was one wonderful answer to my question about where does this come from? Where does your trauma understanding and healing come from? So I'm glad we heard all of that. And the reason why I was going around here on my chair was because there was the outro music kept coming.
Oh, right.
I was like, no, not yet, no, not yet. So this is our time, man. But wonderful, and I really am thankful to you to get this on my podcast, this wisdom that you can listen to again and again, because there's so much in it. I feel filled with explanations and possibilities and images. You're really rich on that. So yeah, horse, rider, binoculars, and there was the water and the sailing before that, and much more. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And of course, I'll link to your page, and maybe also I should link specifically to the stuff that I've printed out here, the Qigong course,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, there's actually a whole bunch of courses happening this year, so maybe I'll send you a link to the courses page because we're
Please.
doing five different courses this year, and some of them are quite involved in esoteric. And again, it's the first time I've opened up training people in a lineage apprenticeship,
Really?
probably in 30 years. So because I'm kind of
Really?
semi-retired from medicine now, so I have more time to teach people.
Wow, it's the first time you've opened.
To be able to do it, have the time to do it, especially with people online as well. Because
Right.
usually it's done like just like in a monastery or training in martial arts and stuff. But yep. So now that I'm writing books and I'm only in the clinic 2 days a week, I'm open to helping people. And also because I'm 57, coming up on it's a 3-year apprenticeship, so I'm hoping by the time I'm 60, I can start passing on lineages to other people, because at some point I'm going to want to go off and live in the forest and actually complete my training. But maybe I'll do that when I'm 70. But I want to train some people up in these things because I know only 4 other people who were trained the way I was.
Yeah,
So these traditions are going to die if I don't get a chance to pass them on. So,
I feel the pressure, the responsibility, the importance, the significance of what you're doing. And like when you were explaining to me your background, it's like, yeah, I was taught this here, and that was based on that and that. So it sounds very unique to me. And I just want to say this to you, Michael, that the reason why I mentioned modern trauma therapy is just because that's my starting point, right? That's just what I have to reference with. It's not that I think it's only that. And I think when you expanded on it, it's clearly that it's not just what we often hear about. There's a
well,
lot
but
more to it.
just quickly to say, Qingshibing, which means in a way emotionally disorienting wounds,
Yeah.
is the core principle of this lineage of traditional Chinese medicine, which goes back to the origin of traditional Chinese medicine, which kind of implies that life requires trauma therapy. When you study Qigong in the old ways, most of it mimics what modern trauma therapy embodied practices look like. Human beings have been dealing with really messed up stuff since there was more than 20 people to deal with. And I mean, that was maybe lightness, but um, that's why I think of very quickly when I think of all of the First Nations, Aboriginal, Native American ceremonies that we have that I've been a part of for decades because of my background. When we're in those ceremonies, we're not singing, we're also lucky and happy. We're in there beseeching a mystery that we don't even know is actually there to do anything possible to help us at least survive, if not thrive in the world. So the earliest healing traditions that go back 50, 200,000 years, and this is true of, say, Aboriginal Australia as well, which, I mean, these people have been the same people for 50,000 years, and modern science has to say, okay, that's true. And that's true of all of us because we all go back to the origin of being human. Human life includes trauma therapy, or you're probably going crazy.
Wonderful.
Or your culture is not very healthy if it doesn't explicitly focus on healing from wounds.
Mm. I really like that. I'm gonna take that personally to like, yes, you're on the right path here, Mannah, with trauma
Yeah,
therapy, because I am so drawn to it. And it's
it
sometimes,
really is the only path.
yeah, 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 to deal with those wounds. Dr. Michael Smith, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.